welcome to episode number 073 of Something Else with Aria and KJ. That's right. The original co-host of this program is going to join me here in a few minutes because we're not talking about Mid-South Wrestling this week. No, 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 no. Him and I went to see the Iron Claw last week, and we're going to be here to talk about that. Me from the perspective of somebody who knows way too much about wrestling, and him from a perspective of a relatively new wrestling fan who didn't really know the story of the Von Erichs. And we'll talk about that in great detail. Now, before we dive too far into this, I want to, give you some programming updates here. First of all, Happy New Year. Hope everyone had a safe and happy Christmas if you celebrate it, and you do have a safe and happy New Year this coming weekend. Next Thursday, the current plan as it sits right now is I am going to watch the New Japan Wrestle Kingdom show, which I think airs from like 2 in the morning Eastern time to like 7. Then I'm going to record the podcast. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, it will drop later than usual. It'll probably be closer to 9:30, 10 o'clock. Much like this week, there won't be a video version. It'll just be an audio version. But that's next week, which of course you can check out at tinyurl.com/something else YouTube. And just a reminder, if you wish to support me without paying anything extra, please consider using my Amazon referral link, which is tinyurl.com/something else Amazon. You just use Amazon like normal, don't pay an extra penny, but I get a small kickback, which helps me pay for upgrades and the admittedly small amount I have to pay to produce this show. So, without any further ado, let's jump into the review. I think it's about 45 minutes. I should have checked that before I started doing this intro. But hey, let's stop listening to me and listen to more of me, but with KJ by my side. Let's go to that right now. And welcome back to our fine, fun radio program. I, of course, am your hostess with the mostest, Aria, joined by our special guest, the original co-host of this program. He is a crazy with a capital K. He is KJ. KJ, how you doing today?
Hello there. I am doing great. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thank you for asking.
Hell yeah. And what are we talking about today, Aria?
We're talking about SmackDown from last week. Personally, I thought it was a fantastic show, and yeah, I just wanted to fuck with you. We're not talking about SmackDown. We are
Oh,
talking the look on KJ's face. We're not even video chatting, but I can just see the look on KJ's face dropped when I started talking about SmackDown. He's like, I didn't fucking watch SmackDown.
actually, I did, but I forgot everything that happened on it.
I was about to say what happened, but you literally just said you forgot what happened. We
Yes.
we are
Now,
great
I don't know if that speaks to the quality of the show or the quality of my attention span.
I think a little from column A, a little from column B.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yes. This is why you and I together only made it 15 episodes.
Okay. I
For,
went to
for
chase
bet
the brain cell.
Yeah, for better or worse. And notice, by the way, we're into the 70s on the podcast, and I still have been taking your name off of the name of the show.
I'll always be with you.
Yes, even though it's something else with Aria and not KJ, it's
Yep.
still KJ.
Yep, my
But
essence, my aura is with you.
the essence of excellence
Yes.
or mediocrity, one of the two. So what we're actually talking about today is in much the same way that we can never talk about modern day wrestling, we're going to talk about a movie that has nothing to do with modern day wrestling. We went and saw the Iron Claw last weekend. Now,
Yeah.
in case somehow, some way you managed to listen to this pro wrestling themed podcast and have no idea what the Iron Claw is about, KJ, do you want to tell the fine folks listening what the Iron Claw is all about?
Yes, but forgive me if I butcher these names. So, the Iron Claw is just about the wrestling story of what was the family's last name again?
The Von
McKinnon.
Erichs.
the Von Erichs. It's about the Von Erich brothers
Did you
and
call
the
what did you
this
just call
this is
them?
the McKinnons.
This is why no one listened to our show.
the Von the Von Erich brothers in the series of unfortunate events that befell them.
Hey, John Eric, series of unfortunate events, huh? Um,
Yes, the lesser
okay.
known part of that series.
No Jim Carrey in this one, though.
No, unfortunately, no Jim Carrey.
This is literally the worst review you're ever going to hear about this movie. It-
So far, we
This,
talked about another movie, but not the movie so far.
holy fuckity fuck. This, I'll tell you what, either nobody's going to listen to this or like this is going to have like 10,000 listeners.
It's gonna go viral
Exactly.
on TikTok, Snapchat, MySpace,
I think it might go live on Live Journal too.
LiveJournal. Oof.
Yes. So, yes, the movie was about the Von Erichs, aka the Atkinsons, and it was a fantastic movie. Um, it's a lot better if you don't really know the story. If you're not me, if you're not Dave Meltzer, if you are not a know everything wrestling fan and aren't going to sit here and pull your hair out at, you know, the inconsistencies in the time frame, um, you will probably absolutely love the movie. And even if you do pull your hair out over a lot of this shit, you're probably still going to love the movie anyway. However, and KJ, you can attest to this, if you are not a wrestling fan, there is legitimately, you're not going to give two fucks about this movie. Like,
True, because there's a lot, I'm a casual wrestling fan, and I didn't know anybody except for when they showed Ric Flair and they mentioned Andre the Giant that one time. So,
yeah. And like literally this is not a very mainstream wrestling movie. It's not even, the wrestler with Mickey Rourke all those years ago. It's like this is this is a very good movie that's appealing to a niche portion of a niche audience already.
yeah,
And
like when you told me about, hey, want to go see the Iron Claw, I've never even heard of it. Like, I didn't see any trailers for it at all. And when you said, oh, it's about the Von Erichs, I'm like, who the hell are they?
and the funny thing is, um like literally if I didn't know that this movie was coming out, I wouldn't have known this movie was coming out. Literally the only two times I ever saw a commercial for this movie were twice during AEW Dynamite the last couple weeks. Now,
Oh, wait, that's the one thing I remember from last week's SmackDown. I saw the trailer for that movie for the first time right after we saw it.
after we've already seen the movie,
Yep,
but
the day after. Well, the day of
yeah.
when I came home.
Now I do have to point out that, when I say that, you know, I only saw it twice while watching Dynamite, it's like I'm sorry, I don't watch, nonstop current day wrestling. Like I'm not watching Raw, I'm not watching SmackDown. I rarely
I
watch
thought you loved the
Collision.
Raw.
Oh yeah, Raw is my favorite show. I can't picture anything I'd rather do for 3 hours on a Monday night.
Yeah,
Like,
you can't stop talking about it.
last night as we're recording this was the very best of Raw in 2023, and I believe the show went 5 minutes long, and I don't know what they filled the other 2 hours and 55 minutes up with, but it was certainly a thing.
And I know
But
when we were watching that movie that you were thinking, man, I wish we were watching Raw right now.
I wish Seth Rollins was here. He would make this movie even better.
His laugh would at least.
Yes. Actually, if Rhea Ripley was in the movie, that would have been the only way to make it better. She didn't even
Okay,
really
if
have
Rhea
to be
Ripley
anything.
wasn't
Like
anything,
she didn't even have to really be part of the story. Just like by sheer coincidence, walking in the background of a shot or something. Like, holy shit, there's Rhea Ripley.
was she even in the business when they were there? Like
She
when they
wasn't even
were on.
alive.
Yeah, that's what I figured, but like just as a side character, I guess.
No, like she was not alive in the 80s.
That's what I figured, but you said like walking in the back. I'm like,
Yes. Like,
as a
I mean, like,
wrestler, or
like just like Rhea Ripley, the human being He just happens to be walking in the background where they just happen to be filming a scene in the movie.
Is she messing with the timeline? Is she like pulling a Back to the Future type deal, or like is
That
this a
would
whole subplot that we don't know about?
that would make sense. So anywho, we should probably actually get to the movie occasionally. So
Nah.
Kevin Von Erich, this like it's funny because the story's not even really about the Von Erichs. It's a story about Kevin Von Erich and his relationship to everything around him. And Kevin Von Erich is played by Zac Efron, who, if you're like me and the only thing you ever knew Zac Efron from was High School Musical, like that, I don't want to say came out of nowhere because I know he's done things since then, but it's like this Zac Efron is not that Zac Efron.
We're all in this together.
Yes, Vanessa Hudgens was not playing Zac Efron's girlfriend and future wife Pam. Lily James
Ah,
was, just for the sake of argument here. And it's funny, I think I told you this, but it's like for some reason, Zac Efron, I know he's done other stuff. I can't tell you what it is, but legitimately, he's one person who's gone past the Disney spectrum that I can't tell you anything other than he was in Disney. Like Miley Cyrus, I don't just think about Hannah Montana. Demi Lovato, I don't just think about her shit or Camp Rock or whatever. But it's like Zac Efron, High School Musical, a movie I never even watched. That's the only thing I think of when I think of Zac Efron.
I only saw High School Musical once in school,
Mhm.
and I knew Kevin looked very familiar, but I just couldn't place him because I was just used to seeing him like that very twinkish look. But no,
Mhm.
he had a really good physique in this movie, like a really buff physique.
Now, now there are a few things, and if you heard other reviews, you've heard, a few people mention them. First of all, Chris Von Erich does not exist. At the end of the day, the producer said that it would take too long to add in a Chris character, to really make it worth it to pop off the screen with killing him off. And so, I mean, if you didn't know of Chris Von Erich, you didn't really think of it twice, but it's like, that was one of those things where you raise your eyebrow. The other thing was that Kerry Von Erich was always the ripped to shreds Von Erich brother, the bodybuilder of the family. And this movie, Kevin was again, it's nitpicky shit, but if you're gonna go into this, keep in mind what you're gonna go into here and see. I do want to mention, and we're going to talk to him a lot about him a lot here. The actor who plays Fritz Von Erich, Holt McCallany.
Mm.
I hope I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but the only thing he doesn't nail right on the head is the voice. He doesn't quite get the voice of Fritz down, but he does a fucking fantastic job as Fritz Von Erich. Like,
Oh yeah, like I love the actor. He did a great job, but he did such a great job of making him so hateable.
oh yeah, KJ wanted to get up and punch the movie screen. That's how mad he was at Fritz.
Yeah, I mean, like one of his first lines is, "Oh, you're my least favorite son. I rate all my sons according to what they do," and it's like, really? It's just so outrageous.
And the thing is, and I've never met Fritz. I never met Fritz. I was, I think, 13 when he died. I think because if either died in 97 or 98. So I'm either 12 or 13 years old. And I grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania. So I sure as fuck did not meet Fritz von Erich, of Dallas, Texas, or, down in Texas. But, every story you hear about Fritz, he did a fucking fantastic job of playing it up.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, they always tell you Fritz, like you hear the stories like Fritz, he was obsessed with one of the kids winning the world title or winning the NWA title. And in many ways, he used the death of his kids to try to get that. He put the lives of his kids underneath pro wrestling.
mm.
And that really came out on the screen here.
Oh
And
yeah, definitely.
to jump forward a little bit, when David dies, when they're talking about the funeral and whatnot, Fritz seems more about how now they can get the world title, or now they're going to
I
get the world
know.
title.
He didn't
And
even care.
yeah, and the sad thing is, it's not like he like in real life, like I'm sure he cared, but keep in mind, Fritz was the owner, the producer, the booker of World Class Championship Wrestling. He did not put anything on that show. He did not want to be on that show. And if you go back and watch the David Von Erich tribute show of World Class, it's on Peacock right now. You can go back
Ooh.
and watch it. It's, somewhere in February 1982. The last thing on the show is a interview with him where he's talking to Carrie and Kevin about how like they're one day now going to be the world champion and they're going to use this to achieve their dream of being the world champion.
Yeah.
It's like that was the big climax of it. It's like, dude, come on. Like you,
Wow.
like I mean, I'm gonna bet like if the NWA hadn't already agreed to it, the quickie title change to Carrie, it was pretty much agreed to. So they were just trying to, get to set that stage. But at the end of the day, it was like 2, 3 months before the Texas Stadium show. You didn't have to fucking do it right away.
Hmm.
Instead of giving you a proper tribute, give you a nice cry. And the one thing they did, they kind of showed you. So if you were looking for it, you knew. But if you weren't, they didn't really stress on was just how big of a fucking deal this was in Dallas was David Von Erich's death. Like, because they show a brief clip of the funeral and the limo going through Dallas, and you see, well, in this case, hundreds of people milling around. There were legitimately thousands of people in the streets of Dallas during that funeral and the funeral
Yeah, it
procession
looked
for
like the
David
death
Vine.
of it looked like the death of a major political figure when it showed the funeral.
It's like this was the death of a major celebrity in Dallas. And that's and I was like, this was a lot of things like I'll get to a lot of the minutia that they get wrong or they just ignore. But like this was an example of the minutia that they got right. And the little things that they got right like that. And it's funny because it's for like a 3-second clip of a limo going through downtown, but still at the end of the day, they got that right.
Speaking of the minutia thing, like the minor things that stood out that they got right. One thing I really loved were the graphics that they used for the wrestling shows, like how it said their names up next. It was so like it was nice. It was
That
very accurate.
that was legitimate to the T. Like it was actually shocking if you watched, this old school wrestling. If you watched World Class, those were similar almost to a fault graphics is what you would see on the World Class TV show.
I love that the
Um,
little details just kind of
yeah.
immerses you into the time.
Now, I should point out, I've kind of mentioned this, and I actually didn't listen to Dave Meltzer's review of the Iron Claw, but I compared it to how I have a friend who's a police officer who can't watch police procedural shows because they ignore like, they don't follow the rules to the T. My sister-in-law is a nurse practitioner and she can't watch a show like Scrubs because it's not entirely believable. And I
Yeah, I know
picture
someone like that too.
and I picture for someone who takes professional wrestling incredibly seriously, you might have a similar issue where you can't shut off the historian part of your brain. Um, I should point out that you know, Jack Jr., the oldest Von Erich child, was referenced in this movie and did play a part in it. He plays it at the end. Um, and just because we've been talking about it, I want to talk about some of the crazy time jumping moments throughout this show. Now,
Sounds good.
again, a lot of this stuff you will not get unless you're, a nut job like me who knows everything and anything and yada 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 yada. But hey, that's the joys of being a nut job like me. So the first one, they try to say that World Class goes on ESPN. The World Class Championship Wrestling TV show is on ESPN. First of all, it was not. It was not on ESPN. And like the AWA was on ESPN. Um, Global was on ESPN. Herb Abrams UWF was on ESPN, but World Class Championship Wrestling was not on ESPN. Um,
Ah,
yep, I know. I'm sure you're sad here, KJ. Now, in addition to not being on ESPN, they time frame it that Harley Race was a four-time NWA World Champion when he got on ESPN. So I guess this one I was a little wrong on because I'm a little iffy on my NWA title reigns pre 1981. And I was estimating Harley Race being a four-time champion in 77, 78, when ESPN wasn't even a thing until 1979. Technically, Harley Race won the title for the fourth time in November of 1979. So ESPN was a thing, but A, it did not have any wrestling on it at all. And B, 2 months into its reign, it was not like they would not have considered a big fucking deal for it to be on ESPN because nobody had it at the time. Cable TV was nothing at the time.
yeah, it was like
But
cell phones.
pretty much it'd be like cell phones in 1999. They existed, but who the hell did you know with a cell phone? Now, the
Well,
next, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was 4 at that time. No, actually, I was 3. So I didn't, even if someone had a cell phone, I probably wouldn't have known what it is.
Probably not. Um, the next thing, and again, this is me being nitpicky, but they were tapping out for submissions. Now, of course, like it's been more than a generation where the tap out is the recognized thing to do during a submission hold during a wrestling match. So, what you may not remember, and KJ certainly didn't know because it's actually older than him, tapping out at least became popularized when the UFC debuted in 1993. And it didn't make it to pro wrestling until Paul Heyman took it for ECW when he was pushing Taz as their UFC fighter character. And so that wasn't, 95, 96.
And so what did they do before tapping out again?
It was just a verbal submission. It
So
was a,
like what if they were being choked out and they couldn't say anything?
well, KJ, I hope you're sitting down for this. I'm sorry I had to have this conversation with you.
I
Wrestling,
know.
wrestling is a work. So they're not really
I
trying to
understand
choke each
that.
other. Well,
I understand that, but there could be an awkward position where it's unintentional. You may not know you're putting that much weight on them. It could
you
arise.
I mean, you could probably figure it out when the other guy starts ripping on your arm to pull it down. At least that's what I would do anyway. But hey, what do I know about wrestling? Um, by the way, next up, Fritz von Erich is watching Ric Flair. Fritz von Erich in his home in Dallas, Texas, is watching Ric Flair beat Harley Race at Starrcade 83 for the NWA title. And then he went outside and told Kerry that it was time for him to get into pro wrestling. And by the way, I had my David Von Erich timeline off because David dies in February of 84, not 82. But
Ah,
still, but still, the point is, first of all, Starrcade was not on pay-per-view. It could not be seen by people all over the world. It was seen, in the Mid-Atlantic region, either at the Greensboro Coliseum or on a closed circuit in that general area. It was not being shown live onto TV in Dallas, Texas. Spoiler alert.
and
Um,
see, these are things that I never would have picked up on. So they just seem kind of like, okay,
yeah.
I just look past them.
Plus, Kerry was already in the fucking business by then. If if you even need more help, because you might be sitting going, I don't know when Kerry actually started wrestling. That's fine. The famous cage match with Ric Flair and Kerry Von Erich, when Terry Gordy slams the head on Kerry's head and it sets off the territory, was fucking Christmas of '82.
Damn.
It's like, so even if you want to pretend that Kerry's first ever match was Christmas of 1982, which spoiler alert, it wasn't. Um, he'd already, in theory, been wrestling for a year at this point.
So
Exhale.
one weird thing with the time I noticed was Kerry's injury on the motorcycle, how it was on the same day the same
Yeah,
night that he won the belt. I was like, that's a little
yeah,
that seems a little too fantastical to be true.
it is. There's a reason why it seems a little too fantastical to be true. It was literally. It's like there are some timeline gaps later too, but this is the most obvious and the most obviously Hollywood annoying one, especially when the true story is just as fine. But like literally, Kerry wins the NWA title, and later that night, him and Kevin. Oh, by the way, the story is that you know, this was all about Fritz, you know, hit whatchamacallit, go having the kids against each other. But
Hmm.
you know, Fritz had been building up Kevin, and then basically one day out of the blue decided it's Kerry's time to get the NWA
Yes.
title. And
That made
so,
me
of
hate
course,
him as well too.
yeah. And Kerry's, Kevin's happy for his brother, but of course, everyone knows what's going on here. And Kerry leaves the house and leaves the title there with his brother and goes for his motorcycle ride, where he gets in his motorcycle wreck that night and loses his foot. Which, for those of you like KJ and don't know the timeline, he won the title in May 1984. He lost his foot in the summer of 86.
Wow.
Yeah. God. And so they never, by the way, if you just follow the timeline of this show, Kerry won two championships and never lost either of them. Because he won the NWA title, and we never see him losing it. We just see Ric Flair with it later on in the movie. And
Yeah.
then, the last thing he does is win the Intercontinental title. And it's implied, spoiler alert, it's implied that almost immediately after, he kills himself.
Yep. He called him the same night, I believe, and was like, I'm in a lot of pain.
It was soon after. It wasn't quite
Yeah.
that, but yeah. But yeah. The other thing, and this was fun because, as for those of you who know the story, Mike goes into toxic shock syndrome. And Mike is one of those people, it's like, again, I've never met Mike Von Erich. He was dead long, long before I knew what wrestling was. But it's like, Mike did not want to be in wrestling. You could just tell everything you ever hear about people with Mike, he did not want to be part of it. But he got dragged into it. And this is where we were at this point. And, Mike got dragged into wrestling. He got injured during surgery. He ended up, you know, going into toxic shock syndrome. And somehow that led to to Kevin having a match with Ric Flair where Kevin shoots on Ric Flair. This was something that legitimately happened in our movie here. And then Rick, being the nice guy that he is like, yeah, whatever. That was nice. Let's go for a drink, buddy. And
Yeah, I thought he'd be way more pissed.
yes, spoiler alert. If you were shooting on Ric Flair, first of all, you wouldn't use the fucking claw hold. Like, yeah, it's one of those things, yeah, I'm sure it hurts, but that is not the move you would use to hurt somebody with. But oh well, here we are. What the hell can you do, right?
That's another thing. When you first told me about the movie, I didn't know why it was called the Iron Claw until, oh, he's using the Iron Claw. And I was like, oh, it's their special move. That's why.
That's where they got the name from.
Ah.
There we go. All right. So at this point, of course, like this is where we start going into all the tragedies. So David dies, and of course, there's always a story of the true story behind how David died. And you might hear 100 people tell you 100 different stories about what happened here. But here's what we know. David died in Japan. There were drugs in his hotel room that I think it was Dick Slater flushed down the toilet or hid or did whatever, basically protect the Von Erich name. Um, Mike killed himself. Chris, who we never saw in the movie, killed himself. And then this is one of those things that even when you know you're me and you know everything, I forgot. Well, forgot's a strong word here, but I blanked on the details of Carrie's dying until we saw it playing out.
Yep, I
Because
remember that. I heard you say, "Oh my God."
yeah, because Carrie comes home for Christmas. Oh, and by the way, Kevin is in the process of selling world class to Jerry Jarrett, which, ignoring the fact it happened already in real life, but Carrie's in the process of selling world class to Jerry Jarrett, which is pissing off Fritz. And Carrie's coming home from the WWF as the Intercontinental Champion and has a present for Dad. It's a gun. And of course, later on, Carrie takes that very same gun into the woods and kills himself.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, this is kind of where the babyface turn for the Von Erich family went down because it wasn't like, this is when Dave, or not David, but that it's Kevin tackled Fritz to the ground and attacked him and choked him almost to death.
My favorite part of the movie.
And there was part of me, and me knowing the real story, me knowing that, I can't tell you whether or not he actually tackled him to the ground and they got into a scuffle, but, I can tell you he did not kill his dad. But at the same time, I'm like, you know, are they going to imply that that happens? And they don't. It's, but still, it's like that happens, and that's Kevin's big moment where he is grown up. He is stepping out of his shadow of his dad. Because his dad, by the way, forgot to mention this part, and you kind of implied it, but Carrie calls Kevin and basically said, and in a plea to be saved, basically. If you got this call in real life, you would have reacted like Kevin does, where, Carrie is basically telling you that he's going to commit suicide. And,
Yeah.
Kevin is basically begging him to tell him where he is, and he'll come pick him up and go from there. And Carrie eventually just hangs up. Kevin calls Fritz panicked and is like, I just got this call from Carrie. We got to do something. We got to help him. We got to save him. And Fritz pretty much blows him off. And this is the story of Fritz raising his kids. It's like Fritz basically had the kids and made them take care of themselves. And that sounds awful, I know, but in a lot of ways, that's exactly what happened here. Fritz made them take care of themselves. And so in the next scene, when Fritz, the next scene is where Carrie's dead and Kevin tackles Fritz to the ground. And it's a real, like, it's a real baby face turn. It's a real great, moment for Kevin Von Erich. And I mean, like I said, I can't tell you whether or not that really happened, but finally he's stepping out of the shadow of his dad. He's finally standing up for himself and teaching the bully a lesson. And
Loved it.
yeah, it's like legitimately you want to cheer when that fucking happened.
Hmm.
And then Fritz, at this point, like Fritz realizes he's fucked up at this point because his parenting style or lack thereof has pretty much cost him all of his kids, including the one who's still alive. But who's the one person that he thought he could probably still bully around and tell what to do? His wife. His wife, who we haven't mentioned because she's there, but it's not like she's playing a gigantic role other than just establishing that she's there. And his wife, he comes in. Oh yeah, and earlier in the movie when Mike was talking to his mom, basically talking about he didn't want to be in wrestling, and they somehow bring up the story about her doing art and her painting. And she basically says that she stopped painting without saying as much, but basically because Fritz wanted her to stop and to raise the family. And so the climactic scene you see with those two is Fritz coming in and asking her what's for dinner, and you see her just painting. And it's like, I didn't make anything for dinner. I'm not hungry.
Love it.
And all he could do was just kind of sit down and realize he done fucked up.
Hey, he got what he put out.
Yep. And the story does have a happy ending, to some degree, because Kevin, who, again, this is, well, they say inspired by a true story. And like I said, when you go through all these, things that aren't entirely correct, you know why it's only inspired by a true story. But it's like in real life, Kevin Von Erich very really had what, four brothers who all died tragically, three by suicide, or I guess five brothers when you count Jack Jr., you know, and now he is having to live on not so much on his own 'cause he's got a wife, he's got children, he's got a family of his own. But it's like he had to stand up and be his own man for once, and he has succeeded, tap on wood, for over 30 years since Carrie died. And
Yeah.
they show at the end they cast Marshall and Ross Von Erich, and they show you that he played with his kids and got that feeling, that remembrance of playing with his brothers again. And the movie ends by telling you the true after story about him and his whole family. They live all together, and I don't think they say this, but they live in Hawaii all as one big family, and
Oh.
it's a really sweet ending to the movie.
One part of the ending I really liked was like that Titanic type ending where it shows them all, supposedly in the afterlife, the all the brothers who
Oh,
passed away, and of course the younger one.
oh yeah. So when Carrie dies, they go to the next scene where you start panning up from the ground and you see Carrie's jeans, you see Carrie's shirt, and you think, "Oh, did Kevin?" This is after the fight with Kevin and Fritz. You think, did Kevin put on the shirt or whatever and walk away? It's like, no, this is a dream sequence of sorts with Carrie going into the afterlife where he now has 2 feet. He now is happy and pain free, and he's going to see his brothers. And he's there and he sees David and he sees Mike and he sees little Jack. And the comedy is like he sees little Jack, who died when he was like 5 years old, 6 years old. And he's like, I hear you're my big brother.
I love
And
that. That was so sweet.
it was a cute, ending. It's like, and ultimately, like I said, this was a fantastic movie. A fantastic movie. I don't know how many people really would want to see, especially if you're not a wrestling fan, like I said, the movie's not for you. It's like you might enjoy it, but it's gonna take some kicking and dragging to get you to go see the movie. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I did enjoy it. Even though I have just like a casual interest in wrestling, I thought it was good. It was very heavy, and I think that happy ending was much needed levity.
Yep. And I mean, that's one of the things that, WWE produced a really good world-class documentary, 15 or so years ago. And there was another world-class documentary, Heroes of World Class, that was really great. And unfortunately, the story of World Class, it doesn't really have a happy ending. And, because everybody dies, the promotion dies, and it's just kind of learning your lessons from it. And that's the one thing about this, is like it did give you a happy ending. And, you know, I would say if you're a wrestling fan, especially if you can plug your ears and close your eyes on the stuff that's not 100% balls accurate, I would say, definitely go check it out. Even if you wait until it's on demand or whatever, check it out. It's well worth it. Um, KJ, would you give it 2 thumbs up?
I give it 2 Iron Claws.
2 Iron Claws. You'd give it 10 Ed Wiskowskis out of 10?
I would give it 10 Ed Wiskowskis out of 10.
You know, it's hilarious. It's like he did not last a whole lot longer on Mid-South once you stopped being a co-host on the show.
Oh
But
no.
but his memory of him and his famous finishing move, the crippler, will live on in infamy.
The
Do you
Crippler.
remember the crippler?
Yes, yes, I do remember the Crippler in all of its crippling glory.
Where he would sit his opponent on the ground. So they're sitting on an upright position, and then he would jump up and splash the top of their neck and shoulder area.
It was not graceful at all. It was just flop, like you just belly flopped on your neck. That's all he did.
Yes, yes, indeed.
We need to
All
get him
right.
as a guest.
I do not want to get Ed Wiskowski as a guest on this show.
Why? You're afraid he's gonna give you the Crippler?
Yes, I'm afraid he's going to give me the crippler. I'm afraid he might bore me to tears on the show. God, do you remember actually watching his matches outside of the crippler? We did not get much entertainment out of those matches.
Maybe he's maybe he's a good talker.
Maybe he has a lot
Has he
to
ever
talk about, but
has he ever cut a promo?
I'm sure he's cut many promos. He was better known as oh my God, Colonel De Beers in the AWA as the South African Colonel De Beers. And now you're making me
So
look up. Go ahead.
if they were to make a movie out of Ed Wiskowski's life, like the Iron Claw, would you see it?
No,
You wouldn't see it. What if it was named the Crippler?
I would not go watch a movie about Ed Wiskowski.
Why not?
Would you?
Yes, I would.
Why the
Right
hell would
after
you
the
do
movie
that?
about Gold Dust.
Of course. Well, I think the Goldust movie would be interesting.
Yes, it would be.
Okay, so let's see. I typed in Colonel De Beers promo into YouTube, and I got one here. Let's see what this.
Okay.
Let's pull this up here and play it here, and let's see if I get taken down off YouTube for a copyright strike in an hour when this loads.
Today, we're going to talk about respect. Respect for whom, you may say. Respect for Colonel De Beers.
Can you hear this?
Respect for South Africa.
Yes.
It seems to me that more attention was given to that terrorist, Nelson Mandela, than was ever given F.W. de Klerk. Well, there's a man today that's going to learn about respect. There's a man that today, on the sports channel, is going to learn the wrath of the South African. That's you, Billy Jerk Haynes. That's you that's going to feel the wrath of the Colonel because the American people did not accord my Prime Minister his right to do what he felt was right for the South African people. Billy Jerk, you may be the commander of the little people, but this is a big man's army.
Yes.
I'd
Now
watch a movie about that.
you would watch a movie about that.
Yeah, I would. Commander of the Little People.
Now, you know he's not talking about like fully grown small adults, right?
I know.
Okay. Um if this video wasn't 10 minutes long, I'd play it. But apparently there is a video on YouTube called Colonel De Beers' infamous Paul Orndorff has HIV interview.
Uh-oh.
We will not be listening to the Colonel De Beers' infamous Paul Orndorff has HIV promo here today on
Nah.
something else.
That's not the vibe. That's not the vibe I wanna
No.
permeate.
There might be something we have to save for next year's World AIDS Day or something. I don't know.
Part of me, I don't know, just a part of me that feels like it won't be very respectful.
You think?
Yeah, just a small part of me.
So, KJ, this show where, I thought you were going to be on for like 15, 20 minutes, it's closing in on an hour.
Hell yeah.
So I think this is the podcast this week. I'm not going to talk about Mid-South, afterwards. I may have to record an opening to the show just because, I was planning on, not having this be the whole entire show by itself. But hey, you go with what you go with. And who knows, maybe this fun little show will actually be more popular than our regular show. That's almost sad when you think about it. Um,
Well, see you next time for the Iron Claw 2.
that's probably not going to happen. I only get you on once every 3 or 4 months. We got to figure out what to get you on next time for. It's funny because
Well, when the Ed Wiskowski picture comes out.
you do have an open invitation to come back anytime you like to talk about anything you'd like.
Yeah, I know. Whenever I get something that I do want to talk about, I'll definitely come back.
And what if you never want to talk about anything?
Then I'll just sit here in silence and just hear you talk. Yo, wordsmithy, like Ed Wiskowski.
And occasionally throw in a couple extra words or two.
Yes.
You're like the ghost of KJ.
Mm-hmm.
So before I let you go, then we got to finish up the show with our favorite segment, Weird News of the Week. That of course is
Oh, yes.
that of course is Weird News of the Week presented by Nobody. Nobody, the company that sponsors nothing. And of course we go to upi.com. Of course we go to our old friend Ben Hooper, who by the way is a former guest on this show. And
Yep.
we go to world's largest Rubik's Cube built in Dubai. Dubai Knowledge Park celebrated its 20th anniversary by creating the world's largest Rubik's Cube. The park, which is home to 700 schools and other educational institutions, built a functioning puzzle cube measuring 9.8 feet on each side. The fiberglass cube weighs in at more than 660 pounds. Dubai Knowledge Park said on social media the cube was built to mirror the approach to lifelong learning at Dubai Knowledge Park, where every step represents a new skill acquired, a complex task conquered, and a knowledge gap filled. The puzzle was examined by Guinness World Records officials and confirmed to be the largest Rubik's Cube in the world.
So can it be solved?
Well, yes, it's an actual functioning Rubik's Cube.
Oh my God. Has anybody solved it? Or is it just
Well,
kind of
I-
sitting there waiting for its first solver?
Well, no, I imagine nobody's really fucking it up to go to that degree yet. But tell me, KJ, how long would it take for you to fuck it up?
Instantly. I have gotten a Rubik's Cube in the past. I messed it up, never brought it back. I never was able to get it fixed.
I once had calling it a 3D Rubik's Cube, like, because, all Rubik's Cubes were 3D, but they didn't just go vertically and horizontally. It also turned diagonally.
Yep, I know which one you're talking about. That one I didn't even attempt.
I really fucked that one up. But by the time everyone listens to this, it's going to be almost New Year's. KJ, do you have any New Year's wishes or any New Year's resolutions you want to share with the people?
Not really. I guess to just keep doing what I'm doing and hopefully nothing bad happens.
This year, I want to lose 3 pounds.
I think you can do that.
Hopefully, if I can lose 3 pounds, then maybe I might finally be the champion.
Wait, did you say 3 pounds or 30 pounds?
3.
3. Okay.
Yes.
Just making sure.
I don't like, having too high of goals. Because if you put too high of goals, you may fuck up. You may be disappointed.
Yeah, and 30 pounds in a year sounds kind of unhealthy.
I know, right? Let's take things one step at a time here, folks. 3. 3 is a good number.
Yeah,
But
it's a nice number.
Since now we're riffing because it's the end of the show, let's pull up our outro music. It's our tribute to Bray Wyatt as we end 2023. And when this eventually loads, there we go. I want to thank everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you again in 2024. Say goodbye, KJ.
Goodbye, KJ.